because I feel like we're missing some time here.
Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you, my good man?
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. I'm excited about these Monday morning little chats that we have. I think it's a good opportunity to get some people some new knowledge, some new information, get them a little fired up, kickstart their week, and make cool stuff happen.
Well, what it does for me, too, is it really kind of kickstarts my preparation for my week, because I start thinking about Monday morning on Sunday afternoon. And although I wish I could turn off a little bit more often, sometimes it's good. You know, you and I had a quick conversation yesterday about a couple of things, and I jotted some notes down and really started thinking. And then in my quiet moments and this morning at the gym and things, I had an opportunity to go through some of the stuff we want to talk about today. So it is time to get rolling.
Are you saying that this particular show had an ounce of pre-planning? Because that's unlike us.
No, it's one of those things where I'm trying to get a little better every day, and I want to produce a good show for the people, the two people that follow me on Blab. I want them to know.
Right. Those fans are getting the best. You got it. I love it. So today we're going to talk about communication.
Yes.
Right? If you've been paying any attention to me over the last couple of weeks, I've been messing around with this whole idea about success being in your face, and F is focus, and A is awareness, and C is communications. So we're kind of hitting on a topic that's interesting to me, and that you actually brought up and wrote about in your newsletter yesterday.
Yeah, communication is a big deal. Being a sales coach and a leadership coach, it all comes down to the way your message is delivered and received. And this is a topic that applies to everybody. And I don't care if you're in sales, if you're not in sales professionally. I believe that we're all in sales, but I also believe that we need to communicate. How hard was it just 5 minutes ago when you couldn't hear me? The irony is not lost on me. Okay.
This show is about communication, and we failed miserably.
And was it us? Was it the platform? It doesn't matter. Sometimes things come up, and sometimes things get in the way. But I want to talk about 4 things today as they relate to communication. I want to talk about the channel. I want to talk about the content. I want to talk about the clarity, and I want to talk about confirmation. And we'll get through those 4 things. I guess just to start at the top, the channel that you use to communicate, is it appropriate?
Well, it's only appropriate if it's appropriate for the intended recipient, right? Correct. So often we choose our mode of communication, and that may not be the preferred mode. And there's so many different channels right now, right? We still have the telephone. Most people don't use that as much. Right. Email, obviously popular, but you're as likely to send somebody a Facebook message that wants to receive wants to receive an email, or wants a tweet, or wants a text, or heck, I don't send smoke signals anymore, but I feel like I could be missing out. You know what the biggest one we should be using more often is?
I do still have a carrier pigeon.
Yeah.
He's getting a little old. He doesn't return as quickly now. But you brought up a great point, and really all 4 of these segments of communication, the recipient needs to be in mind. It doesn't matter how you want to communicate. I don't care how you want to communicate. If you want to communicate in a way that I don't communicate, I'm not going to receive the message, because guess what? I don't know how important it is, because you haven't gotten your message across to me. And if you want to communicate in a different means or by a different means than what I'm used to, your message better be compelling enough to get me to switch gears. Now, it's really tough to do.
And you might want to send them a message that says, hey, I want to communicate with you over here, because I use LinkedIn as a great example. LinkedIn, power tool for business networking and business communications. How often do you send a message to somebody via LinkedIn and not get a response for days, weeks, or months? Why? Because people use that tool, some people, like a set it and forget it infomercial, right? They set it up, they forget all about it, they don't go back. So just because it's your tool doesn't mean it's theirs. And communication only happens when I send you a message and you receive the same message I send, which is why that confirmation piece we'll talk about is so important.
A little side note, that set it and forget it rotisserie was worth its weight in gold. If you could still find one, get one. It was really good. It wasn't as good for everything that they said it would. I'd still rather do my steak on a grill, but I'll tell you what, the chickens, the everything, it was really, really good. Yeah, but
SCI.com evidently is now our new sponsor. How very exciting for us.
Yeah, they need to pony up a few more dollars to get the AV stuff worked out on Blab is what they need to do. Calling Ron Popeil myself. But you're right. That communication doesn't happen unless it goes both ways. It's got to not only be received, but hopefully it's going to be reciprocated. And maybe there's 4 R's that go with these 4 C's too. I haven't thought that far ahead. I'm not that prepared, Terry.
One of them be ridiculous because that would be fun.
It could be.
Ridiculous alliteration. It's always good. So we talked about the channel, right? And you know what? I alluded to the one most important channel that I think people forget about, and this is great for business, and this is even better for follow-up, is a handwritten, self-addressed envelope, right? Just write a note and send it to someone. That first piece of mail that anyone opens all the time is that letter that they're not exactly sure who it's from, but they know it's from an actual person.
Right.
On that, man.
And that it's less reliable. I can tell you now. I sent a letter to. It's a really cool story that we don't have time to share right now. But I sent a letter to someone that I didn't know, and I actually didn't know who lived at this place. And so I sent it by mail because it was the only thing that was the only way I could get a hold of this person. I was trying to get a hold of someone because I was going to be in town. I wanted to see my old apartment back in my college town, right? So I sent a letter and put all my contact information in it. I got a text back, 4 or 5 days later, maybe, said, "Wow, thanks for writing this letter. We'd love to have you come by and tell some stories. I'm so glad I checked the mail this week." So again, you've got to understand the handwritten letter, it stands out. And if you're trying to follow up with somebody, and we'll talk a little bit more about follow up in a little bit, but if you're going to try to follow up with somebody, you got to understand if they're even going to find that, if they're going to see it. You know, it's nice because it stands out from all the other mail. And with follow-up, I'd rather have a personalized. I know your company provides you with letterhead. I know your company provides you with the return address with your logo on it and everything else. But that looks like every other corporate piece of junk mail that everybody else receives. And I love to get the mail on Wednesdays because Wednesday night's when I put the garbage out. And I don't even bring that mail back into the house. So the communication needs to be differentiated, certainly, when you're communicating with the masses. And I'm a big fan of handwritten notes, but also understand that the timeliness of that handwritten note could be affected by whether or not they're on that wavelength.
Right. You know what? And I guess to your point, who you're actually targeting, right? You're going to hit a millennial in a college town in a college apartment that you lived in. Yeah, yep. They might be checking their mail every other week. Because there ain't a lot of good stuff coming, man.
What's coming? What is coming to them?
What could we possibly be? Hey, look, more bills. Cool. Remember that time we signed up for that credit card because we needed that 2-liter of Mountain Dew? Yeah. Now we get the bill for that. That's awesome. That's great.
So, let's talk about the
content.
The content.
The content. It's all about the content.
So what are you saying?
I think the content is key, man. And boy, oh boy, do we hear that all the time. Content is king. Content is king. You know, I'm building the speaking business, and my wife's like, "Why are you on Blab? That's not helping you." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? It's exactly what's helping me. It's the content that I want to talk about and think through and share and get feedback on, right? It's exactly what needs to happen because that's how people find you in this day and age. But for us, in terms of communication, what we say, right? How we say it, very, very important. But what we say almost needs to go through our own microscope before it comes out. And I'm a relatively filterless individual, so I have a tendency to, ready, fire, aim kind of guy. So it can be a little bit challenging for me because I have a tendency to think what I'm saying is spot on, and I'm communicating it exactly from my perspective, what I want to say. But that doesn't mean it's being received the way. And more importantly, it probably isn't as all-encompassing as what I want to say.
So what's less important than what you say is what's being heard.
Well,
right?
So not less important, more important, right?
Yeah, you're right. See, you caught me. Good job.
Wait, there was a setup. You did that intentionally. I like it.
You passed the test. But what's more important than what you say is what is heard. And my wife's taught me this more than anybody else. I'd say something and she's like, "Nah, what?" And all of a sudden she's all upset. And I'm like, "What? What?" She says, "Jeff, I know what you said, but do you realize how I responded to it? You realize?" And okay, great. So I've filtered through it. I understand you're off the hook now, but my initial reaction was not positive. And I'm thinking, and it totally changed the way that I communicate. And so I owe her for that, at least teaching me that lesson time and time and time again. But it's one of those things where what are our intended recipients hearing, right? You can have the best intentions in the world. You can say something that you think is really, really nice. Choose the wrong word. It's a bad deal. And not everybody's going to give you the benefit of the doubt that, like my wife gave me, to stop, think, kind of review what was actually said, probably where I was coming from and what that would all do. So it's especially important in business to make sure that you understand what you're communicating. Think about what you're going to say before you say it. Maybe even say it out loud to a couple people ahead of time. See what their initial reaction is, and then craft your message from there. There are some terminology. There's some terms out there that don't get used anymore, right? There are some terms I learned early on that we don't have problems in the operating room. We occasionally have issues, but we run into issues, but we don't have problems. Just little things like that when I was in medical sales that can definitely help to control the blood pressure of the people involved in that operating room. And you've got to be aware of those things. And that's something that gets refined over time.
Well, and so you said something that's really important, that you could be saying a whole mess of stuff. And if you say the wrong word, right, you can change the direction of it. Simultaneously, sometimes it's not even what you say, but how you say it, right?
Sure.
With the wrong emphasis on the wrong word or even the right word, and it drastically changes the meaning. Language, especially the English language, man, communication, whether verbal or written, can be so delicate because what we think we know about it and what we intend to share about it may not be what they hear, right? So that tonality, the intonation, right? How you put emphasis on certain words, what your level of excitement is. This is why texting ends up being such a dangerous mode of communication, because it ignores so many different characteristics of proper communication. We didn't send that with any tone whatsoever, but boy, oh boy, do people read it with tone all the time. Yes. Doesn't matter whether it's text or email. We hear when we read. Most people are like, "What? That's impossible." And it's true. You listen when you read, right? You can listen with your eyes. So it's a very, very important piece of that.
And texting has made me a better speaker because I have to think about those words. I have to choose those words. I have to, and I'm very, very sensitive to that because I have flat out pissed some people off before with a text or received a text or an email that I just kind of flew off the handle. And then I'll go back and read it again 15 minutes later. And, that was pretty benign. Probably shouldn't have punched that thing. Right.
Right. Well, as long as you punched your thing and didn't punch them for sending it.
Oh yeah. No. I'm a passive.
You're beyond that. Yeah. You're a pro. I got that. But there are a lot of people that react instead of respond, right? Something sets them off. They're in their face in a minute. And it's like, wait a second, dude. This is actually on you. You went sideways based on very, very little. I won't tell you who I have this conversation with mostly.
But what's interesting is as we kind of roll through content, it takes us right into clarity. And when we talk about the how's your message being received, right? How clearly are you delivering that message? Are you just saying a bunch of words, right? And every time I talk to people about sales or about leadership or about management or anything, it always comes down to, are you making an assumption about what you're saying? Are you making an assumption about what you're doing? Are you making it's not fair to assume that people are going to understand your message the way you delivered it. Right. And listen, I've been accused of overthinking things before. All right. This is not the first time this kind of thing has come up, but I really reevaluate the things that I say, and I try to put myself in the recipient's point of view or in their place to understand, okay, if that message was being sent to me or spoken or texted or carried by pigeon, how would I receive that? And the process of reevaluating all this stuff makes us better communicators to begin with. But really thinking about it, again, from the recipient's point of view, was that message clearly stated? Or was it just some words that were sent that, well, they should have gotten the point across? How do you take this the wrong way?
So my biggest bugaboo in this whole clarity thing, from a communications perspective, William Butler Yeats said it a long time ago. Think like a wise man, but communicate in the language of the people. Yeah. And here's where this goes sideways, right? If we're a professional in our industry and we're talking to other professionals in our industry, it's cool to use all that inside baseball talk, all the jargon, all the slang, all the acronyms. The moment you start talking like that to people who are not in your industry, you lose us. And It happens all the stinking time. Right? Because we're so used to being this close to our own world that we don't even think about the other people and their perspective. So when you said, I try and put myself in their shoes, right, to test how this communication is going to be received, that is such an important step that I think so few people have mastered, right? We talk about walking a mile in someone else's shoes, but we really don't even take 27 steps.
That's big steps if you can cover a mile.
Those
are big steps if you can cover a mile in 27.
We barely get started, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you know if it's received? How do you know if your content was received as clearly as you'd like it to be?
So there's this thing in communications. There's several different types of listening, but one of the most important that I think people need to master is this idea of active listening. And active listening is where you basically parrot back, not necessarily word for word, but the gist of the message that you receive, right? So if you were to say something, and we'll practice this if need be, I would repeat back of it, and we'd assure that we both understood the same thing.
Well, sure. So you would just, if you were listening to me, you would repeat back to me what I was just saying to you, right?
Exactly. A very fine example of active listening. Nice job. I'm glad you're paying attention. So it's one of those things that you can do that as a listener, sure, but you can also do it as the communicator, right? It's not unheard of to say, hey, I just want to make sure that you heard what I intended for you to hear. Can you kind of play back where we are right now? And from a leadership perspective, right, whether that's a manager or a leader or a sales perspective, or just trying to be a good parent or spouse perspective.
Sure.
Really, really important to make sure that the message you're sending is the message you receive, that they receive. And it's on you a lot of times because people don't know what they don't know. So you, if it's important to you, need to check out it.
Absolutely. And George Parasota, to clarify your question, are you asking me if clarifying questions are part of active listening too? Yes, indeed. Clarifying questions as far as the listener, also as far as the communicator. I will, on a lot of times, if I'm working with something or working with someone and trying to explain a new concept or trying to restate a concept in a way that my listener understands, I will stop and I will say, does that make sense? And they're either with me or they're not. And it's a very non-threatening situation to put them in, for them to say, no, I lost you there, Jeff. Listen, that happens because sometimes I get a little wild with my metaphors. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they just miss. But the idea that I'm stopping to make sure that someone is on the same page with me, that confirmation, that fourth C that we want to talk about today, that understanding. Are they understanding? It's a very, very important part. And what good does it do you to say a bunch of stuff and then assume, again, that it was received. You put a lot of work into your messaging, but then without that feedback loop, you don't know if your messaging is appropriate. You don't know if it is impactful. You don't know if it means anything. You don't know if you're going to get any action, reaction, or response out of it. And confirmation is, it's you got to close the loop.
Well, and that's funny, right? Because I was sitting here thinking, when we talked about this yesterday, I called it the feedback loop.
Yep.
Right. And instantly you were on a C kick and you were like, oh, good. So it's confirmation. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But if you don't have that circle going, man, it's amazing how quickly things get out of whack. Remember when we were kids, you used to sit in a line and play that game telephone, and somebody would whisper something and then they would just whisper all the way down. Now, needless to say, I was the guy that altered that message every time, right?
On purpose?
Oh, yeah, because it entertained me. It's right, because it was way funnier what I said than what I heard every time. But it was always interesting to watch how that happened. And even without me trying to alter it much, it was always altered, right? Mm-hmm. I could tell from the first person that said what they said to what I heard was always different too, right? So we miss out. And in that scenario, you don't have the time to go out and actively clarify what was said, right, to make sure that we're on the same page.
Well, whenever you have an important message, whenever you have an action item, you leave a business meeting, you are setting a second date, or you're confirming practice with your kid's t-ball coach, whatever that is. One of the things that my mentor taught me, his name's Craig Pildich. I told him I'd mention his name here, and then he apologized for that. His name starts with a C too, by the way. But he said, look, you leave a meeting, you tell someone what you're going to do. You follow up with that person, and you remind them of what you told them that you were going to do. Then you do that thing, and then you send them another quick message, a text or an email to let them know that you did it. And what that does is that maintains this flow of communication. And I can tell you, in business, that is something that the overwhelming majority of people do not do. The real pros do it, right? But when you've got a list of actions, you set those at your meeting, whether it is someone that works for you or someone you work for or someone you're working with. What do we need to do? Okay, based on our conversation, I needed to do A, B, and C. Then go and do A, B, and C, because that's what you got to do. And then send the quick message. Just figure out that feedback loop, that continuum, and say, by the way, I did what I said what I was going to do. What's next? And now we're always moving the processes along. How much communication goes out there and then gets forgotten about? Well, even with the best intentions, again, life happens. Things get in the way. Things pop up. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes it rains. When's the reschedule? When's the makeup date, right? What is going on now? And that just ties it all together, and that's vital, and most people miss it.
Well, I just got done watching a presentation on how to give a TED Talk, right? I have somebody that wants me to coach them in getting on TED this year. And, he cited in the thing P.T. Barnum's old line, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them. Mm-hmm. Right? And so the reason that that's important is because those instances of it hitting our psyche multiple times kind of creates imprints in our brain, which forms, neurological connections that allow us to actually form memory, right? So hitting the same message, and it also confirms that when you said it, you meant it the first, second, and third time. Right. And it gives them the opportunity to say, wait a second, are you sure because this is what I hear. There may be some discrepancies in that. So it's a great opportunity to get that clarification going too.
I thought you were going to say there's a sucker born every minute. And, that when you're talking about TED Talks, and I don't know where you're going with that, Terry. Jeez, I think it's a pretty good thing you put together.
You never know, man. I got all kinds of stories. I just don't ever share them. I'm very quiet.
That's cool. Well, I wanted to mention before we start losing people, because we've gotten through our 4 C's. Terry, you and I published an ebook just this past weekend.
We did. It was pretty too. I have a link for it. I could set the link in there.
Pop it in there. It's an ebook that talks about the value and actually the necessity of a very strong network and a very positive attitude as it comes to building a business. And I think that these are the underrated fundamentals of buying a business. Or of growing a business. It is totally free. Terry put the link in there. It's a cool little thing that we put together. And I think those two concepts are underrated. They're taken for granted all the time. I think there are two kinds of people out there. There are people with really, really great attitudes, and there are people without great attitudes. And the reason that there are people without great attitudes is because they don't realize how important they are, right? So the people who already have great attitudes understand how hard it is to maintain them, how important they are. And when you think about the way you approach your work, whatever it is, the way you approach what you do has an unbelievable impact on how you're able to do it. And then if you don't know the right people, how are you going to grow anything?
I can't even imagine trying to go through life without a network that nourishes and supports and cares and refers and brings me to cool stuff and allows me to take them to cool stuff and just gives a crap about my life, right? Can't imagine what that's like. And to take that one step further, I have no clue what it would be like to have a bad attitude. So I'm going to challenge you, though. You said there are two types of people. There are people that have a great attitude, and there are people who don't.
Yep.
I think there's a third set, man. I think there's the set of people that think they have a great attitude, but just don't. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. The idea that you think you have a good attitude, and it doesn't have to be a great attitude. It could just be a good attitude. Like even an okay attitude, you think your attitude's fine.
Right.
Everybody else thinks you're a total jackass. Now, who's right in that scenario?
Everybody else.
Right.
We've been talking about it all day. Listen, I'm the greatest guy in the world. Everybody else thinks I'm a jerk. Well, then what's my reputation going to say about me? Right. No, that's a very, very good point. That's a very, very good point. I should amend that statement to say there are two types of people in this world. There are the type who value a positive attitude, and there are those who don't. And I can tell you this, and part of the workshop that part of a workshop that I put on is there's a test. And it's as objective as you can get. Score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 and all these questions. And you bring up these ideas that people really don't consider. People don't think about, oh, yeah. Do I really stay mad at my wife for 8 hours? Do I bring all my work stuff home and all my home stuff to work? I mean, I was in a car accident last Thursday. I guess 2 weeks ago now. Stonehouse knows because I missed my event that I was supposed to go and speak at. And I was joking with the lady that hit me before we even made it to the police station. Right. And that could have wrecked a lot of people's day. And not that I am the greatest at that, but I got a text message from her later. She said, "Thanks, Jeff. That could have been a lot worse than it was. Thanks for making it at least a little fun." And that's the kind of thing. I mean, what are you going to do?
That's it, man. Life's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
What they say is 90% of life is 10% of what you do and 90% of how you go about doing it. What's the saying?
I thought it was half of baseball is 90% mental. I wasn't, or 90% of the Yogi Berra. I don't know. Yeah. But no, life is 10% what you do and 90% how you do it. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Right. Just show up, man. And that to me is the biggest challenge that most people have, right? Not just showing up, but showing up ready, showing up with the right attitude, showing up to be of service and just being there and being open. I posted this really amazing video yesterday morning about DNA. They did this really cool DNA study, and it said something about, and we can't have an open world until each of us begin with an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of us are so closed off to so many things. It's like, come on, man.
Right.
Stop. Wake up. Open up. This isn't how your life is supposed to be. Right? You're letting somebody else tell you how to do things.
Right.
You already know, man. Your answers are in here. You need to spend some time and get clear. So, sure. Very cool, man.
So follow the link. Anybody who's here, follow the link. If you're watching the replay, follow the link If you're seeing this on YouTube after I post it a little bit later today, I will make sure the link is in the notes section of the video. It's a quick ebook. It's a quick read. It's just some points, some good things to get you to think about. And it's free. So check it out.
And then added bonus, right? There's a golf outing that's tied to it. You're not necessarily tied to the golf outing.
Yeah.
But if you have friends that are golfers and are interested in business, share it with them. That's all I'm asking. I ain't saying you got to come. Heck, we might not even want you to come, but we want to come up with this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Terry. This was good. Let's do it again next week.
Hey, how about 8:30 on Monday?
I like it.
I'll do that. I'll be here. All right, so let's pause the recording.